Great. So as I introduced, I'm from Araf, and what I'm going to be sharing today is about how we as Araf have been developing some tangible digital solutions over the last couple of months and couple of years into various markets in the offshore wind sector. Now, Araf, if you don't know who we are, we're a specialist engineering consultancy. We've got about 18,000 staff working around the world and operating in about 146 countries and locations, particularly. And what we've been doing is delivering at least about 150 projects over the last 5 years in various parts of the offshore wind industry. Now, we recognized a number of years ago that in order for us to really succeed and for the industry itself to achieve its net zero objectives, we're going to have to embrace all aspects of digital technology. Now, as a firm, we've been supporting the industry in a number of changing agendas, mostly through adopting these digital technologies, as I say, helping them to unlock potential design solutions, navigate future market potentials, and ultimately manage and extend assets. Now, I appreciate in the context of the Americas region, where we're starting to bring assets on board, this isn't as relevant as such as we are seeing in the more mature markets like the UK, but there's an important aspect that right from the beginning of what we're trying to do, we're focusing on how we can really set up our assets for success. Now, the reason and the way we've been doing this is working in essence across all projects around the world, all the way from the east coast of the USA through to the developing markets of Australia. And our work ranges right away from strategy and design to enabling offshore wind farms to be deployed in a more rapid and agile manner. Now, we recognize, as I say, that in order to do this, it's all about having a digital future, and the digital innovation is the only way of achieving the successful deployment of offshore wind at scale. And can you hear me still? And to the scale we need in order to mitigate climate risks, as I say. Now, we've developed a full life cycle approach to digital within our organization. And the nature of this is the fact that we recognize that it's about connecting data through the various life cycle stages of the asset, each of these parts handing data to the next stage of the asset, so that we can get a consistent approach to how we manage it going forward, but also quite fundamentally underlay it or support it through a consistent data architecture that means that we can make sure we capture those lessons learned in latter parts of the assets and the solutions and bring them forward to what we're doing in the early stages to make sure any new build assets we're building capture all those great lessons that we're learning from around the world. Now, we've developed and designed a couple of solutions, which we categorize as the 6 you can see on screen here, that they split across all aspects of the life cycle, starting on the left-hand side with scale, all the way through to Araf Inspect on the right-hand side. And these kind of, as I say, connect together. Now, what I'm going to do very briefly is unpack each of these very, very quickly in turn, talk a bit about them, and show how we've been doing it in a tangible context, because the other important thing we realize within the market is that when it comes to digital, there's a lot of hand waving and saying, oh, look, all these fancy things we can do. But we're really keen to talk about the tangible, actionable things that are going on and the case studies of how we've been doing it. So firstly, starting with scale, which we're using to enable offshore wind deployment. So scale is, in essence, a way of balancing all the site conditions, the geospatial considerations, and the constraints to provide a levelized cost of energy. And with that levelized cost of energy, understand the recommended foundations and turbines for any given site. Now, what this means, in essence, is when you're going to develop an offshore wind farm, there are many complex parts to it. Of course, we know there's many sets of data you've got to bring into consideration. If you're going through the planning stages of trying to work out exactly what's going to work, what's the financial decision, understanding where is the most appropriate place is really key to that. Now, we've been deploying scale as a digital solution, which, of course, in a visual context manifests as maps, charts, various diagrams and data sets, of course, that you can interrogate in a lot of detail to map out the possible deployment scenarios of offshore wind across the entire UK continental shelf. Now, what I mean by that is if you were to take certain conditions like, let's say, bird migration patterns, grid connection constraints, water conditions, wind conditions, meteorological aspects, put them all together into a model and say, which ones are the priorities, which ones are not. That would obviously show you across the UK, across the waters in which you are searching, where would be the most effective place to develop from a levelized cost of energy perspective. And then, of course, if you've developed that site, where would be the next most effective and most efficient, and so on and so forth, and allowing you to dynamically change these levers and these constraints. So say actually you are more concerned or less concerned with fishing, for example, change those parameters, see how that might change where you would or wouldn't deploy your offshore wind farms first. Now, we've, as I say, been deploying this for the UK government, and it's been a great success so far, really trying to map out exactly where, if we're trying to achieve our lifetime or our ambitions of deploying sufficient capacity of offshore wind by 2050, how can we go about doing so? Now, scale is one of the first parts of our life cycle journey. I'll move on to the next one here, which is about virtual engage. Now, virtual engage is a way for us to engage stakeholders in a collaborative and immersive way. And what that means is that if you are looking at the consenting and the consultation part of an offshore wind farm, there are lots of people to engage with, lots of people to ensure they bought into the journey. And before COVID-19, of course, we would typically do that as in-person consultations. But it became apparent that that doesn't always get the right demographics of people to engage. So through Virtual Engage, we've created a virtual platform which has these engaging spaces that bring people and organizations together with all the artifacts and information where you can track movements and questions of people engaging, but also target what you're presenting to the right audience, the right demographic, so they can really understand what is being proposed and what they're looking to develop or what you're looking to develop. Now, an example of where we've done this recently is for Statcraft in a North Irish Sea array, putting out this information so that the audience around can understand exactly what's happening and help them go through that consultation process with comfort. Now, of course, Virtual Engage is the next part of that cycle, and it helps that early planning stage. But what the key is then is when we go on to the design stage and how we can automate that offshore wind design for success for obviously yourselves and the developers and the rest of the supply chain. So what we've done here is we've developed a solution called Optif. Optif couples Araf's expert knowledge when it comes to engineering design, because of course Araf as an organization, as I touched on in my introduction, has a long history of designing and developing energy assets over the world with a substantial amount of staff working in this space. And what we do is combine this knowledge together with digital advancements in technology and indeed our own in-house software capabilities to present and produce a design tool that allows us to significantly reduce the amount of time to design and develop offshore wind foundations. And this is, of course, about testing various scenarios, ensuring you've got all the right aspects considered. Now, the key about this is it significantly reduces the amount of time taken to design an offshore wind asset. And the case study we typically use is you could easily remove 3 days worth of effort down to about 15 minutes, which if you're thinking about the design iterations you have to go through when you're doing offshore wind design, that's a fantastic cost saving that, of course, reaps benefits of testing different scenarios. Now, the image you can see on the screen here is where we've tested this for the Akita wind farm in Japan, and it's been a great success there, helping to really optimize the design of foundations so that, as I say, what we get at the end of it is robust, but also considers all the parameters such as seismic and others that are local to that region, of course. Now, moving on to the next part of this, I'll skip over Connect for the moment just because of time. I'll move on to Leap. Now, Leap for us is an asset management solution. Now, Leap, to unpack in a bit more detail, is our way of looking at how we can extend the life of assets, getting the most out of them and making sure that any asset owner operator can really make sure that the investment they put in from the beginning will get the most bang for buck going forward. Now, of course, there are many people across industry who claim to have asset management solutions. And of course, why wouldn't you in an industry where we are seeing a lot of assets, particularly within the European region, come towards the end of their life? But what we've done with Leap is something quite novel. We've coupled the insights and knowledge that you get from typical SCADA and sensory data with our engineering expertise, again, as you'd imagine for a consultancy like ourselves, to develop this solution, which of course is cloud-based and takes all this data, crunches it in right time, I'm saying right time there intentionally rather than real time, to provide and understand exactly what is happening on a very, very, or as frequent as you'd like, hence the right time, the life of the farm, any challenge you're having, any integrity issues. And we found great success in this, that when you're looking at individual farms themselves, you can easily justify life extensions and save substantial amounts of money when you come into that part of the asset lifecycle. Now, of course, for developing markets, like we're seeing, the US is more the up and coming market compared with more mature markets. You might say, well, actually, do I need to consider life extension asset management right now? And the answer would be yes, because you need to start building in those procedures and those thought processes right from the beginning in order to make sure that when you do get to the asset management stage, you set yourself up for success. Now, we've deployed this across a number of clients. The one I'm able to talk to this audience about today because of confidentiality is London Array. It's quite a large, substantial offshore wind farm off the coast of I guess, London, if you will. And it's been a great success of partnering with the organization who run London Array and understanding how we can bring together technology, bring together their assets with what we've got as a solution here to keep on providing that up-to-date insights around how the asset is performing. Now, coming into the last part I'm going to touch on here very quickly before I go over to questions is about Araf Inspect. Now, Araf Inspect is a digital workflow solution that we've developed in collaboration with an organization and many others around the world to help us simplify the process of capturing data offshore. Now, as we know, offshore environments are quite hazardous. It's difficult to get there. You need to do very specialist training in order to do so. And in any way we can remove the need to carry around paper and pencil, which of course is probably something we haven't been seeing much of in recent years, is highly valuable. But Araf Inspect is more than that. Whilst it manifests as a tablet-based solution, which allows people to pick up, create, and to understand an asset, it also captures the data in an interrogatable way and in a machine-readable way. And that's quite important because when we consider the lifetime of an asset, but also the more holistic concept of a digital twin, it's all about getting data in the right place to make the right decisions about it at the right time. So using such a digital workflow solution in tandem with the rest of our life cycle really make sure that any information and data captured is fed into that pot, if you will. Now, we've been deploying Araf Inspect with great success at various sites around the world, and I continue to roll out and develop that with partners as we speak. So appreciating I'll be quite tight for time because of agenda changes I hadn't realized. So I've had to kind of rush through some of the content to stay on schedule with the rest of the agenda. But what I'd like to say really is that we're doing a lot of work around the world in this. Digital is a key enabler for us in the offshore wind space, and it's something we have a good and established history in. And for the US market particularly, we have some strong local presence that we'd very much like to discuss and to share with you if you're interested. So there's a QR code on screen and email address, but of course you can always get in touch with myself as well through LinkedIn. I'm very happy to discuss further. So that's all I'm going to share on my slides. I'm going to kind of cancel my screen now and go back to the chat window. There we go. Over to you.
Terrific. Simon, that was wonderful. Thank you for the presentation. We're about to see COP26. What would you like to see come out of COP26 in 2 weeks from now?
So I'd like to see from sort of COP26 for me is very topical. It's based in the UK, so it's just up the road from me. Me and many of my colleagues are going to COP. And in fact, Araf have a huge presence speaking at COP on offshore wind. So I'll encourage you to check that out. If you type in Araf COP offshore wind into Google, you'll see our speakers and members of my team who are up there speaking about it. But to answer your question very particularly, what I'd like to see is a real understanding of how we as countries and as society are going to be able to achieve these ambitious targets. There's naturally defined contributions that everyone's put forward and actually come together and coalesce that when we do meet for the next COP, it's not going to be the kind of, actually we haven't progressed as much. It's going to be actually, look how far we've come, look at that trajectory, look at that angle and how it's changed. And when it comes to the offshore wind component of that, of course, offshore wind is going to be a massive aspect of that decarbonisation of the energy system. Of course, it can't be the only way because we have to maintain a base load, but having an understanding of how we can deploy offshore wind much more widely across other markets and new markets and out into deeper water through floating wind is going to be an exciting aspect that will come out of the back of the commitments that we will hopefully see from COP.
Terrific. Well, great presentation. And thank you for showing us everything you all are doing and your contributions to the work.